Ahoy! Joe Buddy Hambone here, and I'm back again with a brand new coupon code from our friends over at Noble Knight Games. This month, the code is LEGENDS. It's good for 10% off orders of $10 or more now through November 19th. Noble Knight has all your RPG back-to-school needs. One-stop shop, and whether it's board games, magic cards, books, dice, whatever it may be, Noble Knight is the place to be. Using the code LEGENDS, good for 10% off orders of $10 or more, running now through November 19th, you can set yourself up pretty pre-holidays with everything you need to run some games for your friends and your family. So next time you're checking out at Noble Knight Games, don't forget to use the code LEGENDS. Good for 10% off orders of $10 or more, running now through November 19th. From our friends over at Noble Knight Games.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. His son is learning how to read the ABCs, but he's not learning them on Sesame Street. Stu Horvath.
Jared doesn't really get on the Sesame Street vibe that much.
It's interesting because Sesame Street was such an institution growing up and for many generations of kids, but I don't really see or know a lot of kids who are super into Sesame Street like they used to be, because I mean, there's no shortage of kids' educational television between YouTube and every other channel on the planet. So,
I mean, he loves PBS. He loves everything else on PBS. It's just like the Sesame Street didn't quite click. It's weird.
Was he watching mystery programs with your mom?
He should. No, actually, she pauses those because almost inevitably there's like a horrible murder when he's like, "Grant, what are you watching?" Yeah. It's just like nothing.
Next thing you know, he'll be like, "P is for Poirot." So, Stu, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about Goodman Games' line of alphabet books.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but they're not just any alphabet books. They're not, like Jera's alphabet books. These are alphabet books for us, for players of role-playing games.
I love it.
So it's not like I ever disliked Goodman Games, but it took me a long time to kind of get the vibe, right? The first time I opened Dungeon Crawl Classics, the rule book for the actual, role-playing game, like I felt like it was shouting at me. And to a certain extent, the ABC books feel like that too, but now I get it. I don't think that I am an effusive or overly enthusiastic person. So when confronted by Goodman Games' overwhelming enthusiasm for old school role-playing, particularly the art of old school role-playing, I kind of just feel overwhelmed, like somebody's yelling at me.
You're not the only one, because I felt a similar way when I first saw their books. As I started getting more comfortable with the RPG hobby as a whole, revisiting them, I really loved that enthusiasm. It was contagious. Yeah. And I can totally see why everybody loves and swears by DCC. And honestly, of all the companies out there that are putting out top quality RPG product, Goodman's been crushing it for years.
It's true. And honestly, the whole old school thing spins directly out of them. This is also like a big tease because we're not actually going to talk about Dungeon Crawl Classics today. And I know lots of people would like to hear me talk about Dungeon Crawl Classics, but we're not going to do it.
Send all your hate mail to Vintage RPG at whatever email provider you prefer.
But they're the first folks in the D20 system era that kind of harken back to the older school vibes. That their trade dress for the original DCC modules was very, throwback to the TSR vibe. And there's just like this boundless enthusiasm for things old school. I feel like the alphabet books are kind of the pinnacle of the Goodman Games love of the old school. These are totally agnostic. They are not tied to Dungeon Crawl Classics in any way or any system at all, which is nice. I love a good system agnostic product. That means that you could basically pick this up and use it for any kind of game that you're playing. I have a couple in front of me. There's probably more. The first one was the Dungeon Alphabet. I believe the second one was the Monster Alphabet. And then there was more recently a Cthulhu alphabet, which I thought was sort of a swerve, but it's actually my favorite of the bunch.
Wait. Hold on. So you're saying that an alphabet that has to do with Cthulhu is your favorite? I mean, who'd have thunk it?
Well, I mean, it's an easy sell, right? But no, I mean, the idea of these books is they're design alphabets. They're full of prompts to help you design stuff. So the first one is by Michael Curtis. I believe it's his first real project that he owns at Goodman. He did Stonehell, Mega Dungeon, and he also did a Chained Coffin for DCC. He's sort of my favorite kind of guy over there. I think that he does really interesting stuff. I'm pretty sure that the Dungeon alphabet is his first effort for them. And the idea is that it's a dungeon. So I welcome tools for making dungeons. So, A is for altars, but A is also for adventurers. B is for books. You get a little bit of H is for hazard. Dungeons are full of them. And you get like a little bit of an abstract kind of, sometimes it's just a little thing telling you like what they're thinking about, a little bit of context, a little bit of philosophical musing over the weirdness of dungeons as a space to explore and exist in. And then you get a chart, a random table that just gives you like a bunch of stuff to kind of like use. And you don't have to use this. There's no real system for how to use it. Like they're just giving you random tables for days. The best part about random tables is that they're random. The worst part about them is that you can exhaust them over time. So you always want more random tables if you're a fan of random tables. And these are essentially books of random tables for no specific purpose. Like it's not keyed to like any particular mechanical function of a game. It really is keyed to giving you ideas on how to do the thing that in this case of the first book is create dungeons. And your first pass is going to always be really kind of tied to the thing that you're rolling. So like I have hazards here and okay, I roll an 8. The dungeon is located in a flood zone. Okay. It gives you like a little bit of stuff for that. But after you use the book for a while, it becomes more of a philosophical tool instead of a direct one. Like there's no hammer and nails here. It's sort of like mud covers a stretch of dungeon corridor or chamber. And like, instead of like being like reading the rest of that entry and be like, okay, I gotta, do exactly what this thing says. It's a prompt. It's like an improv cue for your dungeon building, right? Mud. Ooh, that's interesting. Like sticky, oozy. Like you kind of go from there and start brainstorming and roll it on a different table and take that out of context and just go crazy with it. And of course, all complemented by a crazy slate of artists, old and new. You've got Jeff Easley, you've got Jim Holloway, you get Doug Kovacs, who is like the visual heart and soul of Goodman Games, as far as I'm concerned. Bradley McDevitt, Peter Mullen is another. Stefan Pogue are both guys who are very like old school, new school kind of thing. Jim Rosloff's in there. Errol Otis, like everybody get a picture in the Dungeon alphabet. It's crazy. That's what Goodman does. It's just like get everybody in there, pack it full of ideas, just go over the top with it and like go.
Yeah, it's all my guys, all the artists that I love. And one of the things I definitely appreciate about Goodman is they love their charts. And I love that they love their charts because I think that charts, look, some would say, not me, but some would say that there's such a thing as too many charts. I say nay, because charts is really the thing that kind of keeps things fun and interesting. I love the idea of this book because coming up in D&D, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I could ever run a game because being a player for the first time is plenty intimidating as is. And when I encounter people out there in the world, when I used to go out into the world, there was always that like, hey, why do you play? And people were like, I don't know, man. It seems like a lot. It seems kind of intimidating. But once you get the people to the table, it's like, yo, you could run a game. They're like, I don't know. That seems really intimidating. And to a certain degree, I have to agree with it because it's not just reading a book and putting a dungeon together, putting an adventure together. It's having to explain to people what stuff does. Mm-hmm. And I think a book like this does a great job of explaining kind of exactly what the thing does and giving you the ability to relate that to your players, which I think is very important. Not everyone knows what a trap is. And I know, dear listener, you're probably thinking, oh, Hambone. Everyone knows what a trap is. But I think at this point, it's not cool to make broad generalizations because the language does change throughout the world, and things mean different things to different people. So having the ability to explain something to someone, I think, is such a cool way to be more inclusive in the hobby and to give people the confidence to share that hobby with other people.
Yeah, you kind of crystallized something for me. Like, I feel like the Young Adventurers guides are like this really great on-ramp into not just the tropes and the verbiage, but sort of the thinking underneath the hobby. There's a mindset that goes into playing these games, right? And I think that that's great. A great intro level. They're a 101 level kind of class. These are sort of your advanced books for, like, you've graduated out of the Young Adventurers, you're still interested, you want more. And this is sort of like maybe the start of your master's program. Having dropped out of college, I'm not really sure, but you know what I mean. So there's something of an educational feeling to these, not in like a drag, and more of like, oh, this is like a cool thing to sort of flip through and learn from and just sort of immerse yourself in without like pressure, grades, or tests.
Or crippling student loan debt. I get you. It's an easy reader. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that really does lend itself to encouragement, is being easy to kind of just read and enjoy. And that's the problem I have with a lot of various different kind of game supplements, is it feels like homework, and something like this doesn't feel like homework. And it feels like you're really allowing yourself to kind of immerse in the world and feel cool, like you're a part of it, because now you can kind of speak the language. I've been a salesperson my entire life, and I was a traveling salesman for a good number of years. No one's surprised. I know. You get it. You hear the voice. And I will tell you, when I started in traveling sales, it was a thing where you would watch the people who've been at it forever, and they kind of speak their own language. And it's the language of the job you're about to do. And you kind of want to be a part of that. And you want to just run before you can walk, so you could be in on the joke and in on the conversation. And it's the same thing with tabletop RPGs, because you will remember getting to the table for the first time, and your dungeon master, your game master, your keeper of secrets, your chill master, whatever it is, will be talking in a language that you just don't get because you're not there yet. And then they're going to say something like a caltrop, and you're like, what is a caltrop? And maybe they can't explain it to you. So it's important to be able to learn as you go and feel confident in the language that you are speaking to your players and to the other people who are around you at this table. And it's tough. It's tough, and it's intimidating when you're there on day one. But when you get there, it feels really good.
It's true. So Dungeons is about building dungeons. Monsters is about, partly it's about building monsters, but it's also sort of building approaches to monsters and how to handle them in your game in ways that are surprising and new, which, if you're new, these won't feel like such a breath of fresh air. They'll just feel new. But if you've been around the block for a while, there's a lot of just strangeness. It's sort of just like an endlessly creative kind of process going on, where things are constantly being reevaluated and tweaked, so that there's a devious surprise around every corner. And again, you're not getting specific monsters, you're getting macro level stuff. It's a top-down look at how these things work. Like, R is for reaction is the page that I happened to just open up to. And it's just a great little flowchart of several tables, kind of bouncing around different reactions for monsters that you might encounter, and how those reactions can kind of bleed into other kinds of behavior. These are things that make sense, but aren't necessarily codified in the rules somewhere. Or if they are, you don't know where, because rule books are crazy. And this is just like a fun way to kind of just be like, find something new to spice up your next game, right?
That's awesome. See, I love that kind of stuff, because you're right. It's not easy to find that. And to have like a little chart, you know how I feel about charts, that's cool, man. That's cool. And that's encouraging. And I love that.
And the Cthulhu alphabet, I'm just sort of like, how do you make design tools for like cosmic horror, for Lovecraft stuff? And what that book does, I believe it's Bradley McDevitt really was the driving force behind this one. In a million years, I never would have thought that I would have loved this book so much. But it takes sort of all of the tropes and cliches of the Cthulhu mythos and deconstructs them and then reconstructs them so that like everything feels fresh and weird and new again. I don't personally think that like explicit Lovecraft references work real well in sort of like a D&D kind of context. I really like my Lovecraft to be in like the straight horror, but like this book kind of made me want to like smash those two things together in surprising ways. It was so strange the first time I saw Errol Otis's art for the Cthulhu mythos in Deities and Demigods, because it didn't have that, chocolate and peanut butter vibe. It was too weird. But I've become sort of addicted to that weirdness, and it comes only in surprising ways. Usually when it's something, my knee-jerk reaction is, I don't think that's going to be so good. The Cthulhu alphabet is definitely one of those things. It captures like an essential strangeness. I mean, it's still in the hobby, but it was definitely more prevalent in the old school days. Is a rare and delicious thing when you can find it.
Well, very cool, Stu. Do you have any final thoughts on the Goodman Games alphabets?
Buy them. They're great, no matter what kind of games you run or play. And you should like snag these books. They're full of cool art, and like they're super thought-provoking. They'll change the way that you kind of think incrementally about the games that you're playing. So few role-playing books do that, and like these do it in spades. It's almost obnoxious how good they are.
Well, fantastic. I know what I'll be checking out the next time I check out at our friends, Noble Night Games. This has been another amazing lifelong salesman.
There you go.
This has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG, posting soon about some DCC stuff and these alphabets. They'll be on the feed in November.
Very cool. You could find me on the Twitter and on Instagram at John McGuire RPG. I'm posting more because now I have something to post about. My game, Rocket to Russia, is available now. We've got copies over at Exalted Funeral. It's the first adventure for my game system, 3-2-1 action, and I'm very pumped about it. So if you want to pick up a copy, I know a guy, and that guy is Exalted Funeral. You can also check out our Patreon. If you're a fan of the show and you like us, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintagerpg. We've got a behind-the-scenes look at Stu's book, still tentatively titled Experience Points. We've got a look at my RPG 3-2-1 action. We've got early release episodes. We've got a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, because your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.